Well, I don't know if you ever take those quizzes that people post on Facebook sometimes, like, which superhero are you? Or, which rock star do you look like? Or, which Disney character are you? And, they can be fun. Sometimes they can tell you things about yourself or your friends you never realized before, depending on what questions they ask. Sometimes they ask some really bad questions, or the program just kind of malfunctions and you get weird results. So always take them with a grain of salt. According to some quizzes that I took this week, I apparently am most like Spider-Man and Princess Jasmine. Okay. And Amy tried to do the which celebrity do you look like with a picture of her, but it latched onto my face instead and said apparently I look just like Rihanna. So, okay, sure, whatever. Yeah, exactly. But, I bring that up because our passage for today is kind of like the Bible's version of one of those quizzes. Because the question is going to be, which leader are you the most like, based on how they behave and things like that. Where we'll pick up the story, it's somewhere between 1050 and 1025 BC, and God has chosen a man named Saul to be the first king ever of Israel. And he's begun to rule. And if you've been reading with us, you saw he started out doing okay. He's like, yes, sir, I'll go lead. And he doesn't seem real confident, but he does some pretty good stuff at the beginning. But then later in his reign, he starts to kind of fall apart and not do so well, and ends up doing a very terrible job. He starts to not follow God's instructions to the T. He starts to make some really bad leadership decisions, like deciding, I have a great idea, let's have the whole army fast, until I get revenge. And it's like, well, that's not really a good idea if your army's trying to go into war. They kind of need to be charged up, right? Just some really bad ideas. And as we'll see here in 1 Samuel 15, he basically gets himself fired. I actually thought about calling today's sermon How to Get Fired, but I figured that was too negative, so we'll call it something else. But check it out, starting in verse 1, it says this. So the prophet Samuel said to King Saul, I'm the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came out of Egypt. Now we read about that a few weeks ago. If you remember the story where Moses had to hold his arms up while the Israelites fought, and as long as he held his arms up, they won, that was that story. As soon as the Israelites came out of Egypt and slavery, these guys just pounce on them and attack them. And they're also one of the groups we've talked about that were basically just evil to the core. They had actually created a culture, an entire culture that had no hesitation about basically killing frail people, kidnapping kids for material gain, even killing kids, and doing all the weird idolatry stuff we talked about where they'd burn babies alive as sacrifices and all sorts of sexually immoral stuff. Basically, as one commentator said, it was a culture that had become like gangrene to other cultures. It was so evil to every part of its society, it was actually influencing other cultures terribly to follow along, and they just become this bad influence. So God's had enough at this point in the Bible. He's like, that's enough, wipe out the evil, take them out, it's over, we're done with these guys. They've had hundreds of years to repent and change, and they haven't. So wipe them out. Verse 3, now go, he says, attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. He's saying, basically, understand this group's evil is so ingrained in their culture, it all has to go. Don't leave anything left. Put an end to the evil. It's that bad. Okay, verse 4. So Saul summoned the men and mustered them at Telaim. 200,000 foot soldiers, 10,000 from Judah. We're back to battle. This is so good. Okay, so Saul went to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the ravine. Then he said to the Kenites, go away, leave the Amalekites so I don't destroy you along with them. For you showed kindness to all the Israelites when they came out of Egypt. The Kenites were closely related to Moses' father-in-law and the Midianites, who were always very kind to Israel. In like Exodus 18, Numbers 10, we read about those guys. So he goes, hey, get out of here. Some stuff's going to go down. I don't want you dead. Okay, so they leave. Next verse. So the Kenites moved away from the Amalekites. Verse 7, then Saul attacked the Amalekites all the way from Havilah to Shur, near the eastern border of Egypt. He took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive, and all his people he totally destroyed with the sword. But Saul and the army spared Agag, and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and lambs, everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak, they totally destroyed. Time out. Is that what God said to do? No. What did God say to do? All of it, right?
Everything must go.
Yeah, everything must go. So this is a problem. And verse 10, then the word of the Lord came to Samuel. I regret that I have made Saul king. Because this is not his first offense, okay? because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions." Samuel was angry, and he cried out to the Lord all that night. Early in the morning, Samuel got up and went to meet Saul, but he was told, "Saul has gone to Carmel." Not Carmel here, by the way. It's a different Carmel over in Israel. But look at this. "There he has set up a monument in his own honor." This guy's just too much, right? So first, he doesn't obey God completely. Then he goes and sets up a monument to celebrate how great he is. Okay? I mean, imagine, military guys are, well, they're not here much today. But, if you were in the military, imagine if you did not fully obey the orders of your superior, right? Not going to go well for you. Then imagine if after disobeying your superior, you go and build a monument to celebrate how great you are for what you did. Are you out of your mind? Okay, but that's what he's doing. This is Saul. Ridiculous. Okay, so he builds a monument to himself. Next part, he has turned and gone down to Gilgal. When Samuel reached him, Saul said, "The Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions." Apparently he's in denial too. Verse 14, "But Samuel said, 'What then is this bleating of sheep in my ears? What is this lowing of cattle that I hear?' Saul answered, 'Well, the soldiers brought them back from the Amalekites. They spared the best of the sheep and cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God, but we totally destroyed the rest.' 'Enough,' Samuel said to Saul. 'Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night.' 'Tell me,' Saul replied. Samuel said, 'Although you were once small in your own eyes, did you not become the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel. And he sent you on a mission, saying, "Go and completely destroy those wicked people, the Amalekites. Wage war against them until you've wiped them out. Why did you not obey the Lord? Why did you pounce on the plunder and do evil in the eyes of the Lord?" "I did obey the Lord," Saul said. "I went on the mission the Lord assigned me. I completely destroyed the Amalekites and brought back Agag, their king. The soldiers took sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God at Gilgal." Here's a key verse. If you circle, underline, highlight stuff in your Bible, this is one to circle, underline, highlight, memorize, post on a mirror. Verse 22, Samuel replied, "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord?" Well, God can't be mad at me. I mean, I do stuff for him. Well, I gave him some money that one time. I gave him like $5. I served at Dorothy's. It's like, I sacrificed for God. He goes, "Yeah, but I delight in obedience more than that." Like Jesus says in the New Testament, if you love me, you'll obey me. Not just sing songs to me or do what you think I want. You'll do what I actually said to do. Not pick and choose the parts you like and do the rest your way. No, you do what I say. That's how you show me you love me, right? To obey is better than sacrifice, it says. And to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance is like the evil of idolatry. Ooh. Going after Saul's pride there too a little bit, huh? Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he's rejected you as king. Verse 24, Then Saul said to Samuel, "I sinned. I violated the Lord's command and your instructions, I admit it. I was afraid of the men, so I gave in to them." That's a key verse. We'll come back to that. Verse 25, "Now I beg you, forgive my sin and come back with me so I may worship the Lord." But Samuel said to him, "I will not go back with you. You have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you as king over Israel." As Samuel turned to leave, Saul caught hold of the hem of his robe, and it tore. Samuel said, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one better than you. He who is the glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind, for he is not a human being that he should change his mind." Saul replied, "I've sinned, but please honor me before the elders of my people and before Israel. Come back with me so I may worship the Lord your God." So Samuel went back with Saul, and Saul worshipped the Lord. Then Samuel said, "All right, we're going to straighten this out. Bring me Agag, king of the Amalekites." That's a big word today. Agag came to him in chains, and he thought, well, surely the bitterness of death is past. I'm good. But Samuel said, "As your sword has made women childless, so will your mother be childless among women." And Samuel put Agag to death before the Lord at Gilgal. Then Samuel left for Ramah, but Saul went up to his home in Gibeah of Saul. Until the day Samuel died, he did not go to see Saul again, though Samuel mourned for him. And the Lord regretted he had made Saul king over Israel. Oh, not the kind of role you want in the Bible. God regretted this person was in this. Ugh. Sometimes back I saw this article on the internet called 12 Signs You're a Terrible Employee, Even If You Don't Feel Like It. And the interesting thing is, it's almost like a checklist for Saul's leadership here. The list, it was on MSN, it included things like not being punctual, always making excuses, doing the bare minimum, loving to gossip, thinking you're the smartest person in the environment, not believing in your company's mission or values, being noticeably less productive than your colleagues, not getting along with anyone else at the company, finding yourself regularly apologizing to people, Saul, always looking for a way out, constantly making demands and having no drive. I counted at least 9 of those that you can see in Saul's life, right? If not more. And it's sad. Basically, regardless of how he had started, the way he ended was terrible. You ever know someone with a great start but a terrible ending? And like we saw back in verse 24, this chapter gave us the big reason why that was, that he failed so miserably, didn't it? Because there's what he did, okay? And we can get focused on that. Well, he didn't obey God, and he got a little pride and ego going, built himself a monument, okay? That's what he did. But why did he do that? How did he get there? That verse made it clear. As he's talking to Samuel, he says both those things he did came from a place that was a lot deeper than just his actions, right? He finally admits, I sinned and violated God's command. Why? Because I was afraid of the who? The people. He was more afraid of people than God. He was living for people's opinions and approval rather than God's. And anytime you do that, you will make terrible decisions. Guaranteed, like Saul did. You will end up leading an insecure life, which is often something that people who project a lot of pride and ego actually are very insecure, right? Because they're trying to cover it up. And so there's Saul. You will try to compromise on God's word because, well, I know God said this, but what's everyone going to think if I actually do that? They may not like that. And you'll start compromising, which leads to destructive behaviors, like sin always does. You will live in denial of problems you should actually confront, like Saul. I did everything God said. No, you didn't, right? You'll even mess up the things God's entrusted you with, like his kingdom, like his own family, as you see as you read on more. Basically, if you live for people's opinions rather than God's, you'll end up missing out on everything God wanted to give you in the first place, because it's not found in people's opinions, it's found in his opinion, right? And that's not just something you find here in 1 Samuel. Jesus talks a lot about that in the New Testament. If you read the Sermon on the Mount, the whole middle section, he's just slamming the Pharisees for being hypocrites, because all they do is stuff for people to see. He says, they fast, but it's just for people to see. They pray, but it's just so people go, oh, you're so holy. They give to the poor, but it's just so the people say, wow, these guys are awesome. He goes, if all you're living for is people's approval, that's all you get. God doesn't get impressed. He knows your heart. And if the only reason you do stuff is because you're so worried about what everyone else thinks, God goes, all right, well then that's all the reward you get is the applause of people. Do we really want that? I'll tell you when that really drove home for me was when I was a youth pastor, and we'd be at these conferences where they'd be like a band rocking on stage, and then a speaker would come out and talk about Jesus, and I'd watch the teens in front of me, like some of you guys, where they just talk to each other. They're not even listening to what's going on. But as soon as something happened on stage and everybody started applauding, they'd go from talking to, oh yeah, uh-huh, yeah. They didn't even know what they were clapping for. And I'm reading Jesus' words, looking at these teenagers going, people's applause is worth nothing. They don't even know what they're clapping for half the time when they're clapping for you. And even if they clap for you today, give them 10 minutes on Facebook and they'll talk behind your back. Tomorrow they'll hate your guts. The next day they might like you. Do we really want to live for people's opinions and approval? They change like stoplights, man. God says live for something bigger. If you want people's approval, you can live for that. But you can't have people and God. You got to pick one. Jesus says, live for something bigger than that. Live for God's approval. Live for the applause he can give you, even if the rest of the world hates your guts. Live for his approval. Later, in places like Luke 12, he gets even more intense in what he says. Look at this verse, for example. Jesus says, I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who can kill the body, but after that can do no more. You want to be afraid of someone, though? I'll show you whom you should fear. Here it is. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has authority to throw you into hell. You want to be afraid of someone? Be afraid of God. Be afraid of his opinion. Yes, I tell you, fear him. In other words, remember who God is versus who people are. Oh, what are people going to think? What's God going to think? People, God. God's much bigger. Remember to focus on him, and you tell me who's really more worth being concerned about the opinion of. Though at the same time, remember that God does also love you, right? As Jesus says next here, are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, back then at least? Yet not one of them is forgotten by God. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. But he says, don't be afraid. You're worth more than many sparrows. So what's he saying? It's like, well, first he says, be afraid of God. Then he says, don't be afraid of God. So it's like, well, which is it? Well, I love how Francis Chan sums that up. He says, here's the thing. It's not until we come to grips with the fearful reality of who God truly is that we can understand the security that comes from belonging to him. I'll read that again. It's not until we come to grips with the fearful reality of who God truly is, not until we understand who God is, that we can understand the security that comes from belonging to him. And I love how C.S. Lewis represents Jesus as a lion in his Narnia books, because a lion is such a great picture. It has all this power. It could tear you to shreds like that if it wanted to. But the point is, but he loves you. He's for you. He wants you on his side. He could destroy you, but he uses that power to protect you instead. So it's this back and forth thing of, fear God appropriately. Remember who he is, how powerful he is, but at the same time, don't fear, because that God loves you. And he's using that power to help you and save you and be there for you. But don't take it for granted. Remember who he is, but remember he loves you. And it's this back and forth kind of tension of fear God, but don't be afraid. If you'll choose to be on his side with a proper fear, then you won't need to fear. It's this interesting thing. But you want to stay on his side, though, like Jesus said next there, right? Again, I tell you, whoever publicly acknowledges me before others, the Son of Man will acknowledge before the angels of God. Right? If you stand up for Jesus when the time comes, you let people know, no, I'm a Christian. Even if they'll hate you for it or condemn you for it, Jesus goes, I'll acknowledge you before the angels. I'll acknowledge you before my Father. But whoever disowns me before people will be disowned before the angels of God. That's intense, especially when you realize your only hope of spending eternity with God is because of Jesus. And so if he says, you disown me, I'll disown you. Ooh, I don't want that. Eternity's kind of long, right? God takes this stuff really seriously. He says, don't you be afraid of people more than you're afraid of me. Don't you live for their opinions. You live for my opinion, right? Intense stuff. Don't be like Saul. Instead, check out the next king God picks, chapter 16, verse 1. Next chapter, verse 1. It says, the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? It's sad, but let's move on, right? Fill your horn with oil. Be on your way. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be the king. But Samuel said, how can I go? Saul's technically still in charge. If he hears about it, he'll kill me. The Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I'll show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate. Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, do you come in peace? What do we do? Why are you here? Samuel replied, yes, in peace. I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. So consecrate yourselves. Come to the sacrifice with me. Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab, one of Jesse's sons, and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. Look at this guy. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. Here's another good verse to circle, underline, highlight, right? Next one, memorize this. Look at this. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And that is a verse to stamp in permanent marker on your forehead or something. God doesn't look at life like our culture does. Oh, this person's so thin. This person's so muscular. I could care less, God says, about the outward appearance. I'm looking at the heart, right? That's ultimately why Saul failed. He was a head taller than everyone, you might remember. Handsome dude. Who cares? God says his heart was focused on the wrong things. His heart was worried about what people thought. That's a problem. So let's see who God picks next here. Then verse 8. Then Jesse called Abinadab, another son, had him pass in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, Lord hasn't chosen this one either. Jesse then had Shammah pass by. But Samuel said, no, Lord hasn't chosen this one. Jesse had his 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. But Samuel said to him, Lord hasn't chosen these. So he asked Jesse, are these all the sons you have? Well, they're still the youngest, Jesse answered. He's tending the sheep. Samuel said, well, send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives. So he sent for him, had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David, King David, the big David of Jewish culture. This is where his story starts. Samuel then went back to Ramah. What's interesting to me is the similarity between where David and Saul started, right? Because as God reminded Saul in verse 17 of the last chapter, there was a time when Saul was a nobody, in his own eyes, as Saul himself said earlier in Samuel. And I'm just a guy from the least, like the smallest tribe in the least of all the clans in the smallest tribe of Israel. Who am I? What'd you pick me for? Right? And I wouldn't put it past David if he thought something similar about himself. I'm just the shepherd. I'm the runt of the family. I'm the youngest. I get nothing. I'm out in the fields. They didn't even think about me till, someone asked. I'm a nobody. Obviously, God wouldn't pick him. He's not the biggest, the strongest, the firstborn, which was a big deal back then. Yet God does pick David because, as God says, I'm looking at the heart, right? So check out what we get when we look at their lives as a whole here. You get Saul, whose heart feared people more than God, and that led to an insecurity, which it always will, because, well, what are people going to think in the next 5 minutes? Now, a friend of mine at the aquarium runs our social media, and we were talking this week about how social media is such a weird thing because you can be popular, but you're only popular for like 15 minutes, maybe a day at most, and then it's on to the next thing. And I love what he said. He said, yeah, posting to social media is like shouting into a crowd. Like, that is so true, right? It's going to cause insecurity. Well, they like that post, but what about the next one? You know, I do this blog now with big apologetic questions. And the past three of the past 4 posts, this guy I really respect, he's a big apologetics guy, keeps reposting my blogs. I'm like, that's so cool. But I was joking with Kyle this week. I was like, when he doesn't reblog one now, I'm going to be like, what was wrong with that one? Because there's this part of you that gets very insecure when you're depending on what people think. Right? So that led to insecurity, which then led to pride issues for Saul, because I got to cover up my insecurity because I'm the king. I can't let people know I'm insecure, so I'm going to build a monument to myself. Right? And that pride also led him to do what he wanted instead of what God wanted, so that led to disobeying God, which then led to losing everything. And there's Saul's story. David, on the other hand, as you see if you read on in Samuel especially, David fears God more than people. To the point where, like, when Saul is trying to kill him in a few chapters, and David has a chance to take Saul out, David goes, I'm not going to do it, because I'm honoring God. And he's still the king till God takes him out of the picture. And they're like, but you can kill Saul. You can end this fugitive. The fugitive is not an original story. Read the rest of Samuel. It's there. You can end this hunt for you. And David's like, no, God's job to take the king out, not my job to touch him. I'm honoring God. Saul's a jerk, okay, but I'm honoring God by not killing him. David feared God more than people, and that led to a security that Francis Chan talked about, right? Which then led to a confidence and a self-worth that were based in God and God's opinion, which doesn't change every 5 minutes like social media does, which oddly enough led to a humility in David's life and a love for God that led him to obey God, which led to God literally giving him everything. Like everything. Like, as you read on, God promises David, you get this. You're doing good. I'm going to make your kingdom, your family line is going to be in a kingdom literally forever. Because I'm going to send the Messiah that saves the world through your family now. He literally gave David everything. And what was the difference? David feared God more than people. That's where it all started, right? Now, is David perfect? No. David blows it big time, as you will see later on in Samuel if you keep reading. But God never said he was looking for someone who was perfect. He didn't say he picked David because David was perfect. What he did say back in chapter 13, though, was he wanted someone who was a person after God's own heart, right? That was David's qualification. His heart was the same kind of focus. He had a heart after God's heart, David. So back to the Facebook quiz idea. If God were to make one of those Facebook quizzes and ask, which king are you? Are you Saul or are you David? The only question it would ask in that survey would be, what's your heart look like? Whose opinion are you living for, right? What would it say when you hit the results button? Do you mainly live your life worried about what other people think of you? Or do you worry primarily about what God thinks of you? Like David. And if it's not the one you'd prefer, then I have good news. It's not too late to change that. You woke up on this side of the dirt this morning, so you still have time, okay? You might say, because it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish, as both their stories show us. And since it's not too late, okay, so how do you do it? Well, again, if you look at the chart, what's the determining factor? It's right there. That's where it all starts, with who you choose to live for, who you choose to fear. Saul was Jewish. He followed God, in theory, but he was still more worried about what everyone else thought than about what God thought. So you get there by choosing to make God's opinion more important than anyone else's. Anyone else's. Jesus even says, you love your parents more than me, you're not worthy of me. You love your spouse, your kids more than me, ain't gonna work. I gotta be first. But the interesting thing is, if you put God first, you'll actually love the other people better, right? Because I have days when I don't want to love Amy because she's not behaving like I would prefer. I'm sure she has more with me. But if I'm loving her for God, then that doesn't change. And even on her worst day, I'm still going to serve her because I'm doing it for him, not her, right? There are days, I mostly usually love my job, but there are a few days that happen where I don't like it so much. But if I'm working for God, I'll still do a good job because I'm doing it for him. If I'm working for my boss and he's on my nerves, I might give him a half-hearted effort, right? The interesting thing is when you get there and you finally live for God, not people, you actually treat people better than when you're living for people, right? Because if I'm living for people, they're going to flake on me, they're going to annoy me, I don't feel like serving you today. But if I'm living for Jesus, I'll love my enemies. I'll be a better worker. I'll be a better husband, a better parent, all those things. So it comes with getting there, with I'm going to choose to focus on what God thinks today, regardless of what anyone else thinks. I'm going to focus on his approval over their approval. I'm going to look to him for my value and my worth. He says I'm worth the life of his son. This is my price tag. So I'm going to start looking for him for my value and worth, not how many likes I get on Facebook or if J. Warner Wallace shares my blog. I hope he does. But, it doesn't matter. I'm still worth the life of his son, even if I write the worst blog in the world this week. You are seriously loved. Nothing can change that based on this. Not whether or not people buy your products or laugh at your comedy show or, watch your movie or buy your drugs at the pharmacy. I say at the pharmacy, so anyone watching online is like, who goes to their church? It doesn't matter. It matters what God thinks. So you turn your focus to him. You follow him no matter what. Like Jesus says, who cares? Well, they might shoot me. What's the worst someone's going to do? Kill you? To live as Christ, to die as gain. That's Paul's attitude. Go ahead. You want to kill me? That's a bonus. Big deal. Live for God, not people. And the ironic thing is, it'll make everything better. You'll be a bolder witness for Jesus for sure, because you won't be so, well, what are they going to think? Well, what's God going to think if they go to hell and you had the chance to tell them about Jesus and they would have accepted him, right? If I live for God who never changes, and I build my life on his words like we talked about last week, it's a much more stable foundation than anything this world might offer me. I'll love people, I'll serve people for him, I'll find joy that only comes from that, regardless of how people respond. And if you want some good examples of what that looks like, please read the rest of Samuel this week. Even if you haven't been reading or you got off track, just read 2 or 3 chapters a day. Watch how David responds to things. Watch how he responds to Goliath tomorrow. I know it's a well-known story, but read it carefully. You'll see stuff you never noticed. Everybody, the army's like afraid of this big, tall Goliath dude. David's like, this guy's nothing. I've been watching sheep. I beat wolves. I beat tigers, bears, lions, all this stuff. He goes, this guy's nothing. All the stuff I've seen God do, this guy's going down. And he takes him down. This whole army's afraid. Little David takes this guy Goliath down. Then Saul gets mad because instead of saying, yay, David and me, we're a team, he goes, oh, we're in competition. I'm going to try to kill him. David's on the run for his life. Watch how he responds to Saul. It's awesome. I gave you a little teaser earlier. Watch David's heart and how he lives. And that's what it looks like when you fear God more than people. Read the Psalms he wrote. Oh my goodness, the Psalms. There are so many good Psalms. Psalms where he's pouring his heart out. God, I don't get what people are doing. I don't get why life is so terrible. I don't even get what's going on in myself. But I'm focusing on you because you always make it better somehow. That is what his heart looks like. And then ask God to help you get there, right? It's one thing to read it and go, wow, David was great. Wish I could do that too. You can. God will help you. God, give me a heart like David's. Give me a heart after yours. Change my heart. Pray it every day. Watch what he does. You'll have more patience. You'll have more love. Now realize God doesn't always just zap you with patience. He gives you opportunities to practice patience, okay? It's like I've been praying for patience and all I get is traffic jams. Yeah, it's because God's trying to teach you patience. Learn how to have patience in impatient situations. You might say, I need peace. God doesn't always just zap you with peace sometimes, but he might give you opportunities to find peace in him amidst stress. Things like that. God, I need self-control. Why don't you help me have self-control? The power is there. You just got to use it. There's not always how we would think he does things that he does things. But he will. Because a heart after his is exactly what he's looking for, as he says in 1 Samuel. Let's pray. Father, make us a church, please, of people after your heart. We say dumb things. I say dumb things. I edit them out Sunday afternoons before I put the sermon online sometimes. God, we are so not perfect without your help. Our hearts drift. We want to go our way. We worry about what people think more than you. Shape our hearts, God. May it be in our relationship with you that we find our worth, in our competency, in our boldness, in our humility, in our wisdom, in our guidance, in our purpose, and just the life you want us to have. Help us stop looking around so much at what everyone else thinks. Focus most of all on what you think. Because the ironic thing is, if we focus on you, we'll treat them better anyway than we would have ever treated them otherwise. We'll love them better. We'll experience your joy. And we won't miss everything you want to give us. Would you grab our hearts this week, shape them to be like yours more every day, this week and always. In Jesus' name, please. Amen.